Hello and welcome to C-Suite Middle East. Today we're speaking to Mr. Fadi Hammadeh, one of the top general counsels in the entire Middle East. He's the head general counsel for Al Futtaim with previous experience as a general counsel for DIFC, Dubai Properties, and senior legal roles within Majid Al Futtaim as well, just to name a few. He has an outstanding academic pedigree with a collection of 5 degrees. His LLB is from Damascus University. He has a master's in law from Paris du Assas. He has another master's from Paris and Sorbonne, another master's in law from London University, and an executive MBA, a combined program done by London School of Economics, Stern Business School, and HEC in France. So thank you so much for coming and welcome to the show.
Pleasure.
What is really you think is the role of the chairman in board and CEO succession planning?
It's not, I know it's frowned upon to have a CEO who's a chairman, especially after Enron.
Unless you're Warren Buffett, of course.
Yeah, unless you're Warren Buffett. And there's a good reason for that. And that brings me to the family business sphere, is that he's the owner, or partly the owner. So to the extent that there's no agency problem, because corporate governance solves for agency problem. Agency problem is the natural conflict between owner's interest and between management interest. That's why you create boards. Boards are the bridge. They're the bridges. They operate as the bridges between owners and business. Business have short-term interest, bonuses, quarterly reports. Owners generally tend to have longer-term interest. They worry about their reputation. They worry about their next generation. So you can get that natural conflict. Boards tend to be there to resolve this conflict. Now, when you have somebody like Warren Buffett, or many of the leaders we see in this region, as owners/managers, you can have the chairman and the CEO wearing the same hat. It's not so terrible, because at the end of the day, it makes sense. It makes sense. But when you have a listed business with clear differentiation between executive management and the scope of executive management led by the CEO, and the role of the board as the ears and eyes of the shareholders who have nothing to do with the business, because they're talking about thousands upon thousands of shareholders with little control of the business, then it's very important to separate the two from a conflict of interest management standpoint.
How often do you think we should see a change of board members, at the board? What's a healthy kind of turnover that we should see, or should boards even have fresh blood coming in very often at all? What's your opinion on that?
Look, board of directors for companies are like governments, are like ministers for governments. At the end of the day, we don't have ministers staying in their positions forever. Oftentimes you get new minister every 3 years or even shorter period of time, and that is for the simple reason is that in a particular business, you contribute as a board director, you make your contribution, and then you make way for others to contribute further. There's certain room for stability, I believe. I believe the chairman position, for instance, is a critical position. So to the extent that the chairman plays an important role as a champion for the shareholders, it's important to ensure that the chairmanship position has that level of sustainability and longevity. At the board directorship level, I would say every 3 years, and with effective assessment measures in place to assess the effectiveness of the board. Maybe a board member could be renewed, but there's no reason why, if a board member is not contributing, he or she should not be asked to leave.
And in doing that assessment, you need to take in the long-term vision of the company. Where do we need to be, in the next 5 years? And then bring in board members who are going to contribute to that capability matrix? Or do you think that the vision doesn't need to be part of it?
It's an egg and a chicken situation, because often the strategic direction of a company is decided by the board of directors. So it is presumed that it will be vested in the board of directors to come up with the strategic direction of the company or the group of companies, and that's very, very important. But unfortunately, oftentimes, especially in this part of the world chain, you see many companies with no strategic vision at all. They're very reactive, opportunistic businesses that grew up into huge conglomerates, but still they don't make sense of their size, or they're not cognizant of the size they have reached. So they continue to operate in a reactive manner. And it's important to create the board to create the strategy sometimes. Because very difficult to create a strategy without a board, without the central command that is sitting at the top of the hill, seeing everything, consolidating that vision, not just in terms of financial reality. And as a lawyer, I can tell you financial realities are just part of the truth, but in terms of risk reality. Because risk management dictates how long you're going to be in the business for. How sustainable is your financial reality? And an effective board is one that could see both and work and create a strategy that fit both realities.
And part of it, I think, as well, is as the emerging markets become more efficient, right? So in an inefficient market, you're opportunistic, you can be more tactical, but now we're really reaching a boiling point in a lot of the sectors where they are facing pure competition in some cases, or we're seeing the erosion of monopoly and duopolies as new entrants come in. Is this really going to impact family businesses and companies as a whole, because you have to make some big changes as you face these changes in the market? Are the boards set up to actually deal with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Merchant families in this part of the world have historically enjoyed a certain, let's say, privileges by virtue of the way our countries have evolved, Shane. And I think most family businesses and private businesses in this part of the world are aware of the challenges that they're having. There are a number of challenges. One is the globalization of our economy. So competition is not just a localized phenomena. We're having competition coming from all over the place. And even your own historical partners, like your principals in Western countries, those who have the IP rights and you have the distribution right, are competing with you. These guys want to distribute directly. So family businesses have to evolve in terms of their value proposition, in terms of their processes, procedures, in terms of their funding mechanism and access to funding. But then as well, you have the accessibility to talent pool. I mean, there are more businesses and the talent pool is shrinking. So again, how much of an attractive environment you are in order to cater for the ambition of a new generation that is increasingly fretful. We're having less and less tenure in businesses because very, very interactive. It's a social media generation. And they're fretful. They don't have the patience that you and I or our forefathers had to stay in a business and see if it works or not for 20 years. And then most importantly, it's the pressure coming from the consumer. The consumer is no more accepting of whatever a business can offer. Consumer can go online, compare services, compare prices, and they will demand the best. So businesses that cannot meet these requirements and meet these challenges will, to my mind, inevitably become extinct.
So all kinds of pressures on the board.
Yes.
What kind of review processes should a board be instilling in their business? How often should they be assessed? What kind of reviews should they be using as best practice?
The question itself, Shane, is relevant, but there's a certain inherent conflict in the question. In arbitration, for instance, we have this concept called competence, where the arbitral court decides on its own competence whether any particular dispute should be seen by a court or by arbitration. By definition, if you are required to assess yourself, or the board is required to assess itself, there's a certain conflict and bias, and it's understood. I don't think there's anything wrong with appointing external advisors and professional assessors to be able to assess the board against certain KPIs. But of course, you need to have a KPIs. Oftentimes you see boards operating without KPIs. And these KPIs, as we said, depending on the outlook of the company, can either be short-term KPIs or long-term KPIs. I'm all for long-term KPIs, ones that last for 3 years or the tenure of the board. So as opposed to judging board effectiveness on yearly or quarterly basis, these assessments should be made every 3 years, for instance, to decide whether a board member should be renewed or not, using external advisory if possible, which seems to be the most sensible thing to do from a behavioral standpoint.